And you know, us sports moms have something to say.
Yes, we do.
We'll have a chance to interview across the board, from athletes to the parents to the coaches to even the trainers.
And we're not afraid to share our journey. We're not afraid to tell other moms what we went through in order to raise up a student athlete. So I believe that it's inspirational.
We able to tell our story, the good and the bad.
We can give back positive information.
Absolutely.
You know, we can empower them.
Yes, I think it's time for the mothers to be a voice.
Yes.
That's it.
It's time for us to let you know what's going on.
Hey, it's Karen at Can We Talk Sports. Welcome, you guys. I am here with my co-host,
Kawashika. Yeah.
Hey, you guys. I know we had our season finale on Sunday, but we already had a guest that was planned, already scheduled for today. So we had to go ahead and go live. You know what? We don't always do things like everybody else do. That's what moms do.
Hey.
What you got, Kawashika?
I got that seat boss. Hey. We're gonna talk about that later.
We're gonna, you're gonna tell me about that sea moss.
I know.
Now, if it helps me lose weight, baby, you better bring it.
Yes, ma'am. So, how was your week so far?
My week has been good. It's been good. I had my grandbaby over for a couple of days, and when my daughter drops my grandbaby off, he's here for 2 days. So I'm running between him. He's learning how to walk, and then trying to work at the same time. And I'm like, okay, you got to come get him after 2 days. You got to come get him.
Ain't they something?
They are, but I love them. But you know,
right? You got to. They got this. Yeah, they got this energy, guys. This energy, this toddler energy.
Right. They
but
do.
We got that Nutriverse energy.
We need that.
Yes, when I tell you, Miracle give me, it's just nonstop. So I gotta match her energy, or she gonna leave me behind.
Right.
Yeah. So I truly understand. Oh, and G baby too. They it's amazing to have grandkids. It's a different blessing, totally different blessing. Oh my God.
Yes.
Well, me amazing. Honestly, I just been working business. And I'm so excited about that. The momentum is up, not picking up. It's up. Yes. So that's why I'm so excited with this big old smile on my face. And here, I just want to pass the momentum off to everybody else. Yeah. We need that momentum because you know what's going on in the world. So many things are going on. And so you have to maintain and be positive.
Yes.
And so, I'm excited about the show.
I am too. Going back and looking at his videos, I'm just like, oh my God. It's just an honor to have. And I'm gonna have to ask him, is he a doctor? Because I know he's a professor, and I know most professors are a doctor. But it's an honor to have on the show Mr. Richard Lapchick. And so he has been all around the world, and he's going to tell you guys all about his journey. His journey, you guys, is phenomenal. And when you finish watching this show, you're going to love him because you're going to see he's all about helping us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that when I watched a little clip, a snippet, I was like, this is so profound. I mean, oh my God, I've never heard of him. But yesterday he took my breath away, and I'm just so honored. That's why I'm saying, I said it to him earlier. I'm so honored to be in your presence, and you're on the Can We Talk Sports.
Yes, I thank God for favor. I thank God for opening the doors that he's opening through us. And I thank God for people answering emails. You know, all you can do is just send them an email, but they answer the email. And I just really thank God for that. I'm just excited about season 2 of all the people that are coming on the show. But I'm excited about this end of the show where we're ending with a phenomenal guest. That's icing on the cake right there.
All right. Yes. You can't beat that.
Can't beat that. All right, so let's go. Let's go ahead and bring on Mr. Richard Lapchick. Come on.
There's something about sport. 60 years ago, I was a 5-year-old boy and looked outside my bedroom window in Yonkers, New York, and saw my father's image swinging from a tree with people under the tree picketing. And for several years after that, I'd pick up the extension phone in our house, calls directed at my dad, him not knowing I was listening, and it was nigger lover, nigger lover, nigger lover, and I didn't know what any of it meant, except there were a lot of people who didn't like the man who was the sun, the moon, and the stars for me. What it was about, I found out later, was as the coach of the New York Knicks, he had signed the first African-American player in the history of the league, a league that's now 80% African-American, and there were a lot of people who were unhappy that he did that. When I was 14 years old, because I was his son, he's a triple inductee into the Basketball Hall of Fame, somehow I thought I was going to play in the NBA. The gene pool obviously got seriously shuffled at some point. But I didn't know that. At 14, I went to a basketball camp that had 5 other white guys and a black guy, and one of the white guys was niggering the black guy every single day till I finally challenged him, and then he hauled off and knocked me out cold. The black guy was named Lou Alcindor, became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and we've had a lifelong friendship. And it's because there's something about sport. This 13-year-old boy from Yonkers and that 11-year-old boy from the Bronx probably would never have met had we not played basketball together. 32 years ago, I was working late in my college office, which was in the library of the university. The library closed at 10:30. At 10:45, there was a knock on the door. I assumed it was the campus security police, but instead, when I opened the door, it was 2 men wearing stocking masks who proceeded to cause liver damage, kidney damage, a hernia, concussion, and carved nigger in my stomach with a pair of office scissors. The attack took place because I was the American leader of the sports boycott of South Africa in the era of apartheid. There was a bank loan boycott, an oil boycott, a trade boycott, and a sports boycott. You could smuggle in oil, you could get currency into the country, you could get trade into the country, but you couldn't play sports in the dark, and it became South Africa's Achilles heel. My dad taught me that a leader is somebody who stands up for justice and doesn't block its path. I've spent most of my adult life trying to help young people who live in crises that have become more profound as the generations have gone on. When President Obama was elected, a lot of people talked about a post-racial society. But from the time he started his campaign till the time he took office, the number of hate groups in America increased from 500 to 800. 9% of all hate crimes take place on college campuses like this beautiful campus of the University of Denver or the University of Central Florida where I work. We are the 3rd biggest site for hate crimes in America. The Columbine shootings took place very near to here several years ago. On every day in the United States, the same number of children who died at Columbine High School are killed by a handgun. 12 children every day die of a handgun wound. 400,000 high school students are hospitalized every year for a violent act that took place in their school during school hours. We've taught our children how to hate and how to wage war on one another. If a college co-ed is on the University of Denver at the University of Central Florida, she has a 1 in 7 chance of being raped while she's in college. 26% of high school girls are sexually assaulted. 34% of teenage girls will have a child before they reach the age of 20. And when researchers ask them, why? Why would you take the chance of disrupting your career or your education? 1/3 will finish high school, 1.3% will ever go to college. The almost universal response was because I wanted somebody to love me, because they didn't feel loved at that point in their lives. We're the biggest consumers of drugs in the world, and the biggest consumers of drugs in the United States are people under the age of 25. Why do you take a drug? Presumably because you're not happy with the way you feel without it. The biggest consumers of performance-enhancing drugs in the United States aren't NFL players, Major League Baseball players, and track and field athletes. They're teenage boys under the age of 16 who aren't athletes, who feel so frail in their self-image that they take this substance knowing it could negatively impact the rest of their lives, so they feel they are a different person after taking that substance. You have to teach those young people to believe in what they can't see. to build a floor on despair and a roof over their dreams. My journey has been on the issue of race in sports, but you can have a similar journey in whatever it is you do in your life to help young people in their community, in the nation, and in the world. We're depending on you. People in despair can be transformed by people who care, and I came here today because I know that in this audience and on the internet watching are people who care. You can be difference makers. You can change what's going on. There's
Welcome. Wow, welcome to the show.
Be with you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Hello, Mr. Scott. Mrs. Scott, you're on mute. Okay. Well, Mr. Lapchick, we are excited to have you on the show. So how about just starting to tell us, we heard some of your journey, but go ahead and jump right in and tell us some more about this wonderful journey path that you have been in.
Well, obviously you heard the part about who my father was and the influence that he had on me. That was, something that I was unconscious of as a 5, 6, and 7-year-old, except I knew that there was something terribly wrong in the world. When I was 7, our whole family were Brooklyn Dodger fans. My dad had pitched in the Dodgers organization before he became a professional basketball player and joined the original Celtics. So he asked me if I wanted to come meet Jackie Robinson because he and Jackie Robinson were the co-keynote speakers at a fundraiser at Madison Square Garden. So of course I wanted to meet one of the stars of the team that I rooted for. I didn't know who Jackie Robinson was in terms of his social significance, but I knew he was a great player on the team I rooted for. So I went, spent some time with Jackie Robinson. After it was over, Jackie went home to be with his wife, Rachel. And my father brought all of the New York media who wanted to question him. He had a reputation for courting the New York media to a restaurant near the old Madison Square Garden called Mama Leone's. But just to pause for a second, when Jackie went home to be with Rachel, I hope that most of your audience has seen the movie 42 or the Ken Burns documentary on Jackie Robinson, because it portrayed the incredible love affair that he had with Rachel and how deeply in love they were and how much they intertwined their lives together. And I'm happy to tell you that 58 years after that day I met Jackie Robinson, on the first Monday of every March, I go with Rachel Robinson to the Jackie Robinson Foundation Gala, which is held in the first week of March of every year. Rachel is now 98 years old. She's an amazing woman. She's a real extraordinary person. And if any of you ever get a chance to be near her, seize that opportunity. But back in New York, at that restaurant, the most famous sports writer in New York City shouted across the bar to the other writers, who of course were all white men at the time. At the time, did you see that end showboating? And my dad grabbed my arm and pulled me aside, and he said, "Some people only know how to hate." I didn't know what it meant, but I knew there was something really wrong with this country that I was being raised in. And the friendship with Kareem that developed later when he was Lou Alcindor. So it's endured to the point where when his statue was unveiled at the Staples Center, he asked me to speak at it. When he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama, Henry Louis Gates and I were his 2 guests at the White House. And when I was scheduled for surgery in Orlando, he flew to Orlando to be with me at that time. But as a 15-year-old white kid, the importance of that relationship, most especially, was that I suddenly had a young urban African-American lens to see what racism was doing in his community and other communities of color. And it was really at that point that I decided that I was going to spend the rest of my life working in the area of civil rights. I didn't know what that would entail at that particular point. I went and got a PhD in international race relations and did my dissertation on how South Africa used sport as part of its foreign policy and the international response to it, and compared it to how the Nazis had done that in the 1930s. I didn't think I'd ever be involved in the world of sport again. I was teaching at a college in Virginia. The dissertation got published as a book. I started speaking about apartheid and eventually founded the Sports Boycott, which led to that event that took place in 1978 when I was attacked in my office. And the lead up to that was the first South African team that was coming to the United States. It was a Davis Cup team that was playing in the North American zone of the Davis Cup because the European countries would no longer compete against South Africa. So my job was to go down to Nashville, where the matches were going to take place, and try to get the matches canceled. I was working closely with the African governments, who asked me to announce that they would boycott the LA Olympics in 1984 if this team was allowed to come. So all three networks were there covering because of the important implications for the Olympics. And Dick Schaap, who was a correspondent for NBC Nightly News at the time, came up to me after the press conference, before I talked to the students, and he told me the financial backers had pulled out. It looked like the matches were going to be canceled. I announced that to the crowd. It was an anti-apartheid crowd. They went crazy, and when I flew home to Virginia that night, I thought maybe for the first time in my life I'd done something worthwhile. The next night I was working late in my college office, as you saw in the video, and you heard what happened. I opened the door expecting to see campus security. There was two men wearing stocking masks who proceeded to cause liver damage, kidney damage, a hernia, concussion, carved the N-word in my stomach with a pair of office scissors. And that night, lying in the hospital, I realized that if people had gone to the length they did to try to stop my father 28 years before, and the length they went to try to stop me that night, that they must have thought that we were having an impact on racism that they didn't want to see continue. So I decided that I was going to use the sports platform for the rest of my life to address social justice issues, and that's what I've done. And what happened later that night in the hospital also had a profound effect on me. I think everybody assumed that I was kind of passed out or asleep, but I never went to sleep that night. And I heard the voices of three people in the corridor talking, and eventually they came in one by one. And I think they assumed I was asleep, and each of them leaned over and kissed my hand, and they went back out into the hallway. And I realized there were three black nurses, and one said to the other two, I didn't think white people cared. I knew a whole lot of white people who cared, but I realized that reinforced the fact that I had a role to play and would continue to do the things that I did, which I have subsequently done for the rest of my life.
Oh my God. Oh, I mean, I feel that I feel the compassion. I feel genuine compassion and love in you speaking there. And I heard on one of the videos how you talked about being angry after Katrina, of seeing the Black people being displaced. And I was just like, how you feel angry, and where you can tell that we're not the same color, but yet you feel angry about something that's happening to us. Where does that come? What is that? Where does that come from? And why don't everybody else have that?
Well, I'll just tell you what happened after Katrina, because I also say that I've been rarely angry. Up to that point, I was angry 5 or 6 times in my life. Since 2016, in the last election, I was pretty much angry for the last 4 years, but that's a different story. But after Katrina, the Orlando Magic, with whom we work closely, called and said that they were going to send a plane down with relief supplies, and we're going to do 2 days of volunteering in the shelters in Baton Rouge, which is where the first people were taken after the storm. And my anger, of course, was the fact that for 5 days after the storm, there were 100,000 Black people in the Superdome and Convention Center in unbelievable conditions with no food, no water, unsanitary conditions, and nobody paying attention until Wolf Blitzer finally on Friday night put split screen images on CNN showing what FEMA said was happening and what was actually happening. And the next day, people came in and started bringing the people out of those shelters, out of the convention center in the Superdome, and a lot of them ended up in Baton Rouge. But after 2 days of working in that shelter, I was talking to the pastor of the church, because we were in one of the churches that you saw on television most of the time. There were 1,000 people from New Orleans living on cots and mattresses or just on the floor. And I saw an older Black woman in the middle of the wall with a long line of people in front of her. And there were 5 cots and mattresses on either side of her that looked like 5 nuclear African-American families to me. And I asked the pastor of the church who she was, and he said her name is Ida Johnson. She was 106 years old, and that was 5 generations of her family on either side of her. So I got in line like everybody else to talk to Ms. Johnson, and I still to this day have no idea what I said to her, but I'll never forget what she said to me. This is still me talking. We know that every home in the lower 9th Ward was uninhabitable at that point. 14 feet of water had sat in the lower 9th Ward. And for your listeners who don't know, that's where the majority of the African-American population was. So they weren't going to be able to go home in any short term whatsoever. And I went up to Miss Johnson, said that, and this is what she said to me: God is good. I'm like, how do you have that perspective with all of this loss that you've had? I stepped back and talked to her daughter, who was 87. And she said, this was the day my mother got hope because the Orlando Magic were here. And I said, is she a basketball fan? And she said, no, she just knows that they represent the fact that people are going to come to New Orleans and help us rebuild. And you probably know it's been the largest relief volunteer effort in the history of the United States. It's still going on today. Still today, all these years later, only 1 in 9 families that lived in the lower Ninth Ward are back home. But I decided that I was going to try to do something personal. And with my students, I chair a graduate program in sports management that focuses on using the power of sport to bring about positive change. And we went back in December of the next year, which was the first time we could get into the lower Ninth Ward, because they only restored water and power 15 months after the storm. And a lot of people believe that was a decision by the city fathers, as they call themselves, to reduce the Black population of New Orleans, which was a majority African-American city, to become a minority African-American city. And that's what happened, because you couldn't put a FEMA trailer down on your property to rebuild without electricity and water. And they literally waited 15 months before they put that in. So we went down there in December of 2006, and in the lower Ninth Ward met a man named Stanley Stewart, who was a prominent resident of the lower Ninth Ward. He was one of the last people to leave New Orleans after the transportation finally came into the convention center. He was putting everybody on the buses before he got on himself. His own family was split up for 15 months as a result. Everybody fell in love with Stanley. We worked on his house, which simply had to be gutted. It stood because it was a brick structure. But 15 months later, we were able to get his family back in. We got some skilled people who really know what they were doing to come down and do the finishing touches. But after every time we were there, Stanley would get out in front of the house and say, let me know whenever I can help you, as if, we weren't so grateful to be with him. It was just an incredible life-changing experience for us. And we would get in a prayer circle, and he would say, thanks to God for sending us there and for them being alive. And I'm happy to tell you that all these years later, we've been there for 58 weeks since December of 2006. Our students and my family have worked on 158 homes, rebuilding homes in New Orleans in that time. And it's been the most transformative thing that I've ever been involved with. I've been close friends with Muhammad Ali, friends with Nelson Mandela, friends with people who everybody would love to even get a chance to be in their presence, let alone become friends with. But those experiences in New Orleans are the richest experiences of our lives, and literally transformed them. And so, that's just what that anger led to, into terms of converting into something really positive.
I really have to. I'm looking at your life, and I'm looking at being chosen and called, and I think about the story of you fighting or standing up for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, that fight, and I'm like, was that your answer? Was you answering the call or answering being chosen at that moment? Then that was the beginning of your life, just going down this path. Do you ever question yourself as far as, was I called to do this or chosen, or did I have a choice?
I just think it was meant to be. I don't know whether I was called or chosen, or it was just happened that way. I was put in that sequence of events that opened my eyes to things. I had a father who was who he was. He was the first white player to play against black players in the 20s and 30s. He developed a rival. So he played on the original Celtics, which was considered the greatest team of its era. And all my father's friends would tell me that, oh, your dad played for the greatest team of all time. And my dad would always pull me aside and he'd say, but there was this team, the New York Rens or the Harlem Rens. And they were an all black team that no white team would play against. And the Celtics decided they wanted to change that. So they developed this rivalry. And they played for the next 13 seasons against each other. Each team would win one, the other team would win the next game. They were so dominant as great teams in general that they were both inducted as teams into the Basketball Hall of Fame. But my dad felt he learned about racism by just like I said, that talking to Kareem and being exposed to Kareem helped me. The owner of the team was named Bobby Douglas. He became close friends with Bobby Douglas of the Wrens, and the experiences they had helped shape who he became. So the Celtics would be able to stay in whatever hotel they wanted to stay in, whatever town they were playing in, but they would watch their friends board a luxury bus that Bobby Douglas bought for his team because he knew that his players wouldn't be accommodated in those same hotels in the 20s and 30s. Celtics would eat wherever they wanted to eat, but Bobby Douglas and his team would bring the food onto the bus because he knew they weren't going to be served in those restaurants. On 3 occasions, they left town in tandem because they were going to play 100 miles or so away the next day. And the Celtics pulled into the gas station behind the Wrens in their Stutz Bearcats car, and the Wrens pulled in only to see the owner come out with a rifle because he wasn't about to serve gas from his lily white pumps to this group of black players. In 5 of the games that they played against each other in the 1930s, there were race riots that took place during the games because angry fans didn't want to see black players and white players playing together on a court. The Celtics and the Wrens would come out with knives packed in their socks if there was rumors that violence might take place where they were playing. And the basketball used to be called the net game. And I think a lot of people who were familiar with the term thought it was because of the net under the rim. But it was really came about because owners of arenas where violence was threatened would build nets around the court so fans couldn't get to the players and cause them harm. My dad and his opposing center, Tarzan Cooper was his name, both inducted into the Hall of Fame as players, would not shake hands before every game. They would embrace each other and often kiss each other because they wanted the people in those stands to understand that this was not just about a Hall of Fame basketball game for the Wrens and the Celtics. It was what their vision was, what America could become. And in 1947, my dad was the coach of the Knicks, and he brought the Wrens to the NBA Board of Governors meeting to get them admitted as a team. And my dad was probably the most influential person in the league, so he thought they had a pretty good chance. And the owner of the team came out and said to my father and Bobby Douglas, "I'm sorry, Joe and Bobby, but the league decided not to admit the Wrens." And my father said to Bobby Douglas, "I'm going to resign. I don't want to be a coach in a league that's what happens." And Bobby Douglas said, "Joe, you have to stay and be coach. You might get another chance." And that's what happened 3 years later when he was able to bring up Nat Sweetwater Clifton. 1947, when he tried to do it the first time, was, of course, the year that Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball. So my dad had a great influence on me. My sister was a civil rights, so I'm 75, she's 87. She was a civil rights activist in the 50s and influenced me. She moved to Africa in 1961, and I started reading about Africa and fell in love with the continent. I've been there 35 times since then. So there have been various people along the way. I'm married to a woman for 34 years who works shoulder to shoulder with me on social justice issues and fights the fight with me. That makes all the difference in the world. And we together have a 31-year-old daughter who herself is a social justice warrior. So I'm a happy guy.
It's embedded. So we're gonna take that Big Mama come on. We're gonna come back and Kawasha gonna have the other set of questions for you. Come on, Big Mama.
Let me tell you.
Uh-oh.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm ready. I just have a few things to say this evening. This was kind of a pop-up on me. I wasn't sure that we were having a show, but so you catch me looking like this. Fabulous. So 3 things this evening. Oh man, now everybody know Big Mama know who that is in and all through her veins. So I'm definitely praying for my quarterback. He's had some injuries. Just want him to get back together. Jameis, you're scaring me. Ted, I wish you hadn't gone away. But Sean, why don't we call my buddy? Let's call Caps. Let's see what he's doing. I don't really trust James, I know he had eye surgery and he's supposed to have 20/20 vision now, but that LASIK surgery could go either way. But anyway, Sean, call Colin. Just let's see what is he doing. He might could take us through the rest of the season. My second thing is Antonio Brown. Antonio, Big Mama tell you all the time, calm down, baby. What's wrong with you? Who hurt you? Who did it? Do we need therapy? Because now Tom has gotten you over there with him in Tampa Bay, and I need you to act accordingly. So I hear these things that happened prior to you signing. Tampa Bay say they knew about it, but I don't want you to have any more incidents. Sit down, get a prayer life. That might help you. But at the end of the day, you can call Big Mama. We can talk about it. We can see what's the real deal. What's the problem, man? My last thing, I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what the sportscasters have to say. I don't care what the reports look like. LeVar Ball, whatever you're doing, man, you doing it. LaMelo was drafted last night, number 3. I see that they had a lot going on in Chino Hills with all of his boys, and that is a family life that would be very interesting to hear the real story, because LeVar seems to be relentless, and it's like, how do you tell your dad, I don't want to play basketball, I'm tired of doing this, and he's like, on you, no, this is what you're gonna do. But that's all that I have. I watched the draft, and oh my God, those babies, and because they are young men, but their emotional reactions to being drafted, not knowing who they are, knowing that they are capable, knowing that they soar above the rest, but still to be so overcome with their emotion that after all I've done, I finally got here. And to see those moms just right there. One of the guys, his mom was deceased, and to see him have her picture and the grandmother's picture, it just says to us sports moms, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. They may act as if though they don't appreciate it sometimes, but they love the guidance. I can remember when I would tell my son, no, you can't go. No, you need to be home by this time. And his friends could go and they could do it. And one of his friends told me years later, after, they're 20 plus, he's like, I always wish that I had a mom to tell me sometime, just come home. No, you can't. He said, I had so much freedom until I didn't know what to do. So I want to say to all our student athletes, I know you're having a tough time with this COVID, but keep your head up and keep doing what you're doing. That's all Big Mama has this evening.
All right, Big Mama. Thank you. All right. We always got to get our wisdom from Big Mama. All right, Kawashika, you up, baby.
Yes, sir, Mr. Richard. I had so many questions. I'm just going to narrow it down. Looks like the time is running out. But one of my main questions I had is about the young generation. I'm really, I can feel that passion about the young generation, and especially in sports, the sports world, because they have that platform to speak, and and a lot of people will follow. And one of my questions was, how do we help the young people come against what's going on today, like the hate crimes? For example, black on black crimes that we have. I mean, it's real. And, I know you're from a different color, but give us some insight on what we can do to help the young people to fight against or come against, or help us to, not, to be in a positive light instead of the negative light. Because when young people, they get upset and they, they see a lot of different things that's going on to our race and things like that. But for them to stay positive, how can we help the young generation to stay on the right road? I said so much, didn't I?
Well, of course, if I had the answer to that, I don't know what I'd be, but it's more than I am. It's one of the biggest issues out there. I think our younger generation of, especially teenage kids now, there's so many things going on in their lives that I mentioned some of them in the TED Talk that are so overwhelming. We have child abuse in the United States takes place every 10 seconds. Sorry, a report is made every 10 seconds and 1 in 10 is reported. There's human trafficking out there that children are the biggest victims of in the United States. And then all the things that were already mentioned earlier. It's such a complex world for them. So the first thing I would say is if you have the capacity to make them feel safe and confident that there's real possibilities that they can dream dreams that maybe they can't see right now, but to create those dreams for themselves and then do everything they can by emphasizing education and social programs, maybe getting them involved in some community program that is addressing social justice issues if they're old enough and mature enough so that they feel part of it, so that they feel they have a stake in solving the problem as well. Because I definitely believe that one of the most hopeful things, excuse me, for me at this time, as opposed to previous horrible times in the history of America in terms of race relations, is that I believe Generation Z and the millennials are much more committed to social justice. They talk to each other. They have this technology. They capture things. What they capture on their smartphones makes racist acts indisputable as opposed to police disputing them. There were 27 days in 2019 when a police officer did not kill somebody, a citizen of their community. 27 days in an entire year when a police officer did not kill somebody in their community. And many of those were in the line of duty, but too many of them were like George Floyd and other victims that we've had in our faces in these past few months to have to deal with the reality of police brutality. But the reality of police brutality has to bring us to the other signs of systemic racism that affect, housing and healthcare and education and finance. Where do you get your finances from? The criminal justice system. We have 5% of the world's population in the United States. We have 25% of the world's prison population. They're mostly brown and black. They've mostly committed crimes that won't even be on the books of state legislatures. In the forthcoming years, 35 states now decriminalized possession of marijuana, which is what the majority of crimes that have our young people in prison for. And when they get out of prison, people tell me, oh, they're going to get out of prison, they'll be okay. Well, they're not entitled to any form of federal assistance, whether it's housing, food stamps, they can't vote. And bottom line, if they go to apply for a job, if the employer says, if you ever committed a felony, and the answer is that they have, that's usually going to be the end of the interview. So we have to, as parents and me as a grandparent, and as young people, fight for the structure of systemic racism. And for me, the bottom line figure for everything is the wealth gap in the United States. And I don't have to leave it at this exact second, but I want to make sure I say this, that the Forbes list of the 400 wealthiest Americans have an aggregate wealth greater than all 42 million African Americans combined. How do you get around that? This is not a short-term problem. So we have to support our young people, make them believe in themselves, make them believe that with the support of their community, there's a possibility that their dreams can come true, so that they focus on the positive things that are possible for them rather than fall into some of the things that might seem easier.
Wow. Mr. Richard, there was a video you did about 12 years ago, and you were in the video, you was just talking about all these different people who had made mistakes, and you were talking about choice and consequences. Do you think that that's something that we need to really embed in our kids at a younger age? Because, I think I was just reading something the other day about LSU and there was another player and how there were some rape victims and how some of the players, how did they get past it? Did nobody investigate it? Do we really need to go back to a younger age and let our kids understand about choices and consequences?
I think if they really understand the consequences and there's a source of hope in their lives, that it could be much easier for them to make the good choices. And, I can't understate the role of one of the things I'm excited about being on this program is it's about mothers and their influence. I've been lucky enough to work with the mothers of various professional athletes, NFL moms and NBA moms. And so I chair a graduate program in sports management. We have all these students coming together to try to enter a career in sports that's going to use the power of sport to affect positive social change. But one of the days that we set aside is to bring Dr. Lucille O'Neill, who's Shaquille O'Neal's mom, in to talk to the students about how important it is when they're working for a college or a professional franchise to treat the mothers of the athletes and embrace them, because they can have a great influence on who their sons are or who their daughters are and how they're going to perform for their teams or their organizations. And, Lucille is just such an amazing person, but, Lucille will tell you that she's another mom who has influence on her kids, but you're all out there doing great things with your children in terms of teaching them responsibility, like you're talking about now, teaching them the effects of consequences if they make bad choices. And, I salute you for, your perseverance, your courage, your willingness to stick with it and make sure your children become the best possible people that they have the opportunity to, knowing that they're growing up in this racist society.
Kwashka, yeah, another question.
Yeah, I have one more question. I know it's time to go. What is politics in sports? I mean, how is that connected? Because I heard a person say there's politics in sports.
But what I hear is people say keep politics out of sports, and politics has always been in sports. It's been part of the DNA of sports. The Olympic movement was refounded in the 1800s so France could punish Germany because of the Franco-Prussian War. They wanted to keep the Germans out of the Olympics. So literally the foundation of modern sport is built on politics, but we've had politics, throughout the history of sport. And I think what we really need to do is to use that politics in a positive way. I think what John Smith and Tommy Carlos did in Mexico City, what Ali did in the late 1960s, refusing to go to Vietnam, were just the most amazing statements that shook America in ways that, if I said the things that they did or you did, probably wouldn't have had the effect. And they faced terrible consequences. Smith and Carlos didn't get a job for 7 years. Ali faced 5 years in prison. When Colin Kaepernick took the knee in 2016, I told my wife he'll never play another season in the NFL, and he didn't. But I think what's happened now is the athletes have risen together. And when the Milwaukee Bucks refused to come out for a playoff game when they were the favorites in those playoffs, and the league and the Players Association followed them immediately and stopped play, and professional sport just stopped because of what had just happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin. This was, I think, the most important act of athlete activism since Carlos and Smith and since Ali. And these athletes are now working together. We have the most diverse pool of employees in America or in the world, in the NFL and the NBA particularly, but to some degree in Major League Baseball as well. And they're voices that need to be heard, and I support them in everything that they're trying to do.
So, I saw the video that I think a newscast was interviewing you. You was talking about how significant it was for the NBA to boycott in the WNBA. And you said you have been waiting for this for over 55 years of them doing that. So, I think the thing that was what was stopping them is because, this is the first time they ever made that type of money all their lives. And here it is, they're going to stand up for something where, like Kaepernick, you cut off your paycheck. And that's where that fear came in. So how, what is different now?
Their fear was justified. That's what happened throughout the history of since Ali and Carlos and Smith. I think part of what happened was the death of Muhammad Ali. Young people I don't think have a great sense of history. They probably knew that Ali was a great athlete and that he did some social justice things, but when he died, they saw 125,000 people out in the streets of Louisville following the funeral entourage to the cemetery, and my wife and daughter and I were there. They saw news stories about all of the extensiveness of Ali's involvement in social justice issues. They saw that he was probably the most hated person in America, or certainly one of them in the late 1960s. And they saw, I believe, when he died, he was probably the most popular person in America. And they started to think that maybe they could do things that were involved in social justice too. Not long after that, the 4 NBA superstars took the stage at the ESPYs, and ESPN gave them the platform to talk about race, racism, and police brutality and community relations. And athletes and the public generally admired them as well. So I think these were important things that told athletes that maybe their time is coming. And I think the thing that really pushed it over the edge was as the second season after Kaepernick took the knee was about to start, and nobody really knew how many players were going to take the knee, that on that Saturday night before those Sunday games, Donald Trump once made it a stump speech somewhere, that he said that he wished all NFL owners would fire, and he used an expletive, those people who were demonstrating against the anthem. And the next day, the commissioner of the NFL gave the full swing slate to his players to go out there and take a knee. And more than 200 players, owners, and coaches took a knee that day. I'm not sure what would have happened if Trump didn't do that, but he did. Mm-hmm. And I think that also helped propel because people saw, one of the reasons I love Jamel Hill, who used to be on our faculty and lived in Orlando when she was starting out with the Orlando Sentinel and became a good friend, is I believe she was the first person to call out Donald Trump as a white supremacist, something that now became routinely understood in the country. But I think athletes began to see that and realize what the fight was about, and they could be part of it.
Well, I'm asking you to please come back, because I have 2 pages of notes and we didn't even get to all of it. And I want you to meet the other moms, and we're coming back in the second season next year. I'm asking you to come back. I know you have to go because you're so busy. You got everything, so much going on. And
I'd be hurt if you didn't ask me back. I'll be back.
All right.
All right. Good night. You were great. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Richard, for coming on
the show.
Thank you.
We really, really appreciate it. And we don't mind if you put some plugs into all those people you know. Tell them to come on the show, because it's time for the mama's voices to be heard.
Like Can We Talk Sports can go to Africa.
Yeah. We're going. Yeah, somebody invited us to United Kingdom. We're gonna go over there. We're gonna go to Jamaica to help them build a rec center. So here we go. So we need some people to help push us. So anyway, I know you gotta go. So thank you so much for coming on the show, and we will see you next year. Tell your wife we said hi.
I will.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, that was so amazing. I had so many questions, and you know how your brain just be like, okay, you ask this, get this out. Yeah. And I know he had to go, but it's really an honor.
It was.
Oh my God, someone that fights for you that's not the same color, and not only that, he was on the front line doing the work.
Yeah.
Literally doing the work. So.
All right, girl. We'll see you. We'll see you next year. All right.